This is Ryan Poles' favorite time of year, so let's break down who on the offense he'll be watching at this Senior Bowl next on the Unbearable Sports Podcast.
We're going to take the North and never give it back.
So that's a good pick. You get the corner. I got to go bold, right? I got to go bold for this.
Yeah, she's got some nice long
Welcome
hair.
back to the Unbearable Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Brad Barron. Make sure to like and subscribe out there on YouTube and hit the bell so that you never miss when we go live on Sundays and Wednesdays at 7:30. But we continue to give away the Darnell Wright jersey. Just rate the show 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. Link down below in the description. Happy Senior Bowl week 1 and all. There is so much information going out there about this Senior Bowl. And quite frankly, the Senior Bowl is so exciting because there's so much good talent out there. And as we know as Bears fans, this is when Ryan Poles really goes, okay, this is how I build my team. He loves drafting people in the Senior Bowl. So that's why today I really want to just break down the offense. Now I'm going to try and do deep dives on 5 of these players. Otherwise, I'm just going to kind of rattle off a couple of the people to keep an eye out for and why. So let's get started though, because this is Senior Bowl week. This is, first off, pay attention to what goes on during the practices. I'll do a recap after the Senior Bowl of risers and fallers. But really, the practices are super, super key. But let's go to the quarterbacks and talk about some of these players, because this is where I'm super excited about the Senior Bowl, because 2 very good quarterback prospects are going to be there. Now, will the Bears draft a Bo Nix or a Michael Penix Jr.? Because those are the 2 people that are playing. We talked about these guys before. They are both very talented quarterbacks that should go in round 1. And Penix might drop to that round 2 because of some of the injuries. But really, one of the big people to watch is Bo Nix, because we talked about this when we previewed the quarterbacks. Bo Nix reminds me a lot of Jalen Hurts. He kind of has a very good system looking at the first read, but still is able to kind of go through a lot of his targets. I think it's going to be very interesting to see how does Bo Nix process a new offense, and how does he look with other wide receivers around him? Because we know that his 3 seasons at Auburn weren't necessarily the best, but his 2 seasons at Oregon, that tape looks phenomenal. We're breaking it down. All of you that have watched Bo Nix at Oregon, it's like he looks really freaking good. So let's see him at the Senior Bowl. I think this is a perfect opportunity for him to try and gain some ground and solidify himself as a potential top 16 draft pick, which sounds nuts, but a lot of draft analysts say that he could go in that range. Definitely something to look out for. But on the other side, Michael Penix Jr., this to me, I'm actually even more interested in than a Bo Nix. Michael Penix Jr., quarterback out of Washington. When we were breaking him down, to me, he reminds me of current day Geno Smith. This guy can throw it like crazy. This guy has that quick release and just an absolute howitzer for an arm. My big question is, can he kind of put some of those touch passes in? And I think it's going to be really interesting to see how he plays. Yet again, new system, but also when he throws with the amount of velocity that he's able to throw on the ball, I want to see how these wide receivers catch his passes, because I'm not going to want to catch those if I'm that wide receiver, because it's going to break. He has that Brett Favre arm where it's going to break your fingers when you try catching it. He's got incredible arm strength, even though to me, he still throws like Uncle Rico. I don't love his throwing mechanics, but the dude could just freaking whip it like crazy. Also, another big piece, a lot of those injury concerns, the torn ACLs, the AC joint problems, his shoulder problems, a lot of that gets solidified or figured out at some of these spots. They can kind of watch more of that and understand it. Obviously, too, the combine is where they can look deeper into it. But to me, I'm so excited to watch this game because you have 2 prime first-round caliber players that you're able to watch at a all-star game like this. But Michael Penix and Bo Nix are 2 people that definitely circle, because the Bears could trade back. The Bears, we don't know what they're going to do. We're not going to know until the combine, because that's usually when business goes down. And that's after that was when the Bears ultimately made that trade. So to me, I want to see what they can do. Those are the 2 big people to watch out for. But rather than going down our typical like quarterback, running back, and everything like that, I want to go all the way down to the interior of the line, where I'm not going to do a full deep dive on these players, but when you're watching the game, just look at the center position, because you have Jackson Powers Johnson out of Oregon, who's going to be playing, Zach Frazier out of West Virginia, and Cedric Van Pran out of Georgia. And, Powers Johnson out of Oregon. I think I might have said Georgia on accident, but Van Pran is out of Georgia. You're talking about 3 of the top centers that are all going to be playing. Just look at the center position, because I guarantee you, one of those players are going to be drafted high, and there's just nonstop talent at that center position. Also at the guard spot, Chsristian Haynes out of Uconn is one of my favorite guards in the draft, has strictly played right guard, but just is a very good and talented guard. Just keep an eye out for him. I'd rather stare at the centers, but the guards, if you really want to look at it, look for Chsristian Haynes. And then let's go to the tackles, because I think a lot of people are going to be saying, wow, you got to watch these tackles. And when you look at who's out there from the tackle position, Talise Fuaga, offensive tackle out of Oregon State. He's the 18th overall prospect. Then Troy Fontenot, 24th overall prospect. Jordan Morgan, offensive tackle out of Arizona. There's lots of good day 1, day 2 tackles out there. But I don't know. For me, I think that the Bears might want to go later round, because I think that they're going to try and get someone. They probably like Braxton Jones. They probably like Darnell Wright. So to me, I think that they might want to try and get that Larry Borom replacement. And that's why I'm looking at Javon Foster out of Missouri and also Christian Jones out of Texas. Those are 2 late round tackles that I think that they might want to bring in as that Larry Borom replacement. There's also a lot of other handful of good tackles. Yet again, very, very deep Senior Bowl this year. Now, before we get into some of the most important, I'll do a deep dive for the wide receivers, because that to me is the next important. But there is some good tight end depth. Couple little notes. Jaheim Bell out of Florida State, one of the top 5 tight ends consensusly. Same thing with Theo Johnson out of Penn State. 2 good, solid tight ends that you can get in the 4th and 5th rounds. Just look out for those main players. But then the last person before we get into the wide receivers, and I'll do a good deep dive of that, is the running back. Jaylen Wright, to me, out of Tennessee, is someone to look out for. He really excels as a zone scheme runner, and I think that ultimately the Bears are going to be trying to draft another running back, whether that's in the 4th or 5th round, just to add a little bit more depth. Jaylen Wright seems to be able to fit this scheme, because Seattle always drafted gap runners, and they didn't excel in the Tennessee or inside of the zone system. So Jaylen Wright, someone to look out for. But let's go into these wide receivers, because this is why I really wanted to dive deep into the wide receivers, because this is where it gets interesting. First off, Xavier Legette out of South Carolina is someone that I think that the Bears would really like. I realize I didn't have a draft profile on him yet, but he's someone that reminds a lot of people of DK Metcalf, but really had only one good season. Definitely need to watch him to see, hey, does he explode? Does he impress people? Because he could be someone that, Shane Waldron looks at and goes, hey, that guy reminds me of DK. But someone who's also super high on my list as someone to watch out for is Devontez Walker. Devontez Walker is 6'2", 185 out of North Carolina with phenomenal hands. Obviously a senior, because this is the Senior Bowl. Consensus, he's ranked 53rd, and he's wide receiver 11. And to me, I have him at wide receiver 9. I have him as a day 2 selection, and maybe if the Bears trade back, whether it's that 9th pick, he could be available. But this is huge for him, because last year PFF gave him a 68.2 grade for UNC. But why is he ranked so high if his grade's so bad? Well, when he was playing with Drake May, their chemistry just seemed a little bit off. And when I was watching the UNC tape, he didn't strike me as a day 2 prospect. But when I watched his Kent State film, he dominated Georgia, dominated Washington, dominated Oklahoma. And to me, I don't see a lot of super high end when I was watching him in 2023. When you put on the Kent State film, this guy looks like a first rounder. This guy looks like a early day 2, kind of reminds me a little bit of like a Chris Godwin almost. But this is where, to me, Devontez Walker, I really want to see him in the Senior Bowl setting, because also in 2023, the NCAA was going to have him miss all of 2023 because he had a transfer, because he had a sick relative. Very touching story, but ultimately NCAA eventually lifted that suspension off of him. So in my opinion, I don't think he was able to get adequate time to really kind of sit in this offense. And because before that, he was projected to kind of go in the first round. So this is a huge game for Devontez Walker to say, listen, I'm better than all these other players. You should include me in that round one conversation. But let's continue going through some of these other wide receivers that I think are going to be just fun to watch. And someone who is incredibly fun to watch is Malachi Corley, wide receiver out of Western Kentucky, senior, 5'11", 210. And everyone says this is Deebo Samuel 2.0. 83.1 PFF grade, which was 33rd, projected to go day 2. He's wide receiver 15, number 75 overall on the big board. To me, I have him as wide receiver 19. Now, someone might say, well, why do you have him wide receiver 19 and he's someone to watch out for? Because, well, in 2023, 79 catches, 985 yards, 11 touchdowns. But the reason why I want to watch him is he going to run wide receiver routes? Because when he was at Western Kentucky, he was really used as a screen target, running drag, so just that low little route, just running across the middle of the field and then just getting an easy pass to. So that's where they just wanted to get the ball into his hands. And that's why I think that the Senior Bowl is huge, because now he can show how can you play wide receiver. And that's why his strength is his yards after catch, very Deebo Samuel-esque. His weakness is playing wide receiver, because he doesn't play wide receiver. He plays more of a running back playing wide receiver, where he's not truly running crisp routes. He's not separating from anyone when he's running an actual route. So he really never showed that full route tree. This is a great opportunity for him to show, hey, I was just never asked to do that at Western Kentucky because I'm just so freaking good. So that's why Corley is someone that is super high up on my list. And just, I think he could also explode. He could kind of be that Tank Dell from the Senior Bowl as of last time. But let's also break down the other person, Johnny Wilson, 6'7", 237. Florida State wide receiver, redshirt junior, but I think technically qualifies as a senior. It's just, obviously, 6'7", insane size. And, consensus board, number 74, wide receiver 14, projected to go in the third round. Reminds me of like an Auden Tate, and 76 grade, which was 123rd. I have him all the way down as wide receiver 20. Why is that? Because he's big, he's gigantic, but he can't really move too great, and I'm curious about his separation skills. Just like an Auden Tate, he wowed me with his highlight plays. And also, Johnny Wilson, though, the guy is very difficult to bring down. He's 237 pounds as a wide receiver. That's where he's got this gigantic ceiling to him. Like, literally, he's 6'7". But you look at his stats, 41 receptions, 617 yards, 2 touchdowns, has a fairly high drop rate at 10.9%, and also doesn't run crisp routes. That's where the question of him being a wide receiver is where I more so question a Johnny Wilson. Can he look like a natural wide receiver rather than just this gigantic basketball player, basically, that's playing out there? And also his agility reminds me a little bit of like EQ St. Brown, where I don't see him like he takes longer strides rather than quicker strides to then be able to make more sudden types of moves. Just a gigantic behemoth of a wide receiver. But the last guy I just want to touch base on, just because I like him. He's just a solid player. McConkey, wide receiver out of Georgia. Yet again, labeled as a junior, but is playing in the Senior Bowl. 5'11", 185. And really, this is, I hate to say this, he's the stereotypical like white wide receiver that's just the slot player. He's number 54, wide receiver 11, but to me, I have him all the way up at wide receiver 6. This is a guy that's just like Hunter, reminds me of Hunter Renfrow, right? He's a stereotype, like projected to go in the second round, and really just a good player. And you look at his stats, 30 receptions, 483 yards, 2 touchdowns. It's not going to jump off it's not going to jump off the stat sheet, but that's how a lot of these Georgia wide receivers are. They don't put up big, gaudy numbers. It's just, what can he do? He 93rd percentile in separation over the past 2 years. This dude separates. He just gets open. He catches the ball. He blocks well. He does everything. He can run with the ball in his hands and break some tackles. So to me, he's just one of those high floor, low ceiling types of players. I think he's going to come in day one, instantly be a starting slot receiver in the game. So that's where, to me, he's just really does seem like a good slot player that just knows how to play the game of football. Just the biggest con is just his natural size. Like, he's very slim, but he is a playmaker that can do a lot of good things. So that's who to watch. Wanted to just try and compress this as close as possible. Otherwise, I could talk about this for hours about who to watch for this Senior Bowl. But was there anyone that I missed on the offensive side of the football? Let me know down below in the comments. Who are you excited to see out there? Also, make sure to like and subscribe out there on YouTube, and we'll be breaking down the defense next. And with that, Unbearable Sports Podcast, we are out.
Yeah, she's got some nice long hair, and you know that she's a